In this specific case, we have reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we want to make sure that it's not just the financial corruption that is going forward in this prosecution, but it's also the human cost that's taken place. In this particular case, we have learned that the Illinois Commerce Commission was aware that Commonwealth Edison had thousands of safety violations on their guy wire insulators going back to 2009. We've also learned that Commonwealth Edison that the commission never investigates Commonwealth Edison. A year ago to this date, we were in front of a circuit court judge in our lawsuit requesting that the commission turn over documents that it had on this occurrence, communications with Commonwealth Edison. Not only did they refuse to turn them over, but it took a court order to obtain that information, which is currently under protective seal by the court. What we have learned in subsequent depositions from the commission is that the Illinois Commerce Commission has never investigated Commonwealth Edison. At the time, we suspected that there was a relationship between Commonwealth Edison and the regulatory agencies. And Friday, we had confirmation of that. And we want to make sure that what doesn't get lost in all of this, and before the media and the courts move on to the next issue, that they realize how this affects real people, how it's affected Jeanette and her 3 kids when she lost her husband, and how it's affected Jordan and will affect all of them for the rest of their lives. What I'd like to do right now is I'd like to introduce David Wise and Bob Bingle, who represent Jordan in this case. You guys are muted.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Bingle, and myself and Dave Wise at Wise Morrissey represent Jordan Zulauf in this case. And what is going to be critical and what everyone should know about this is what Commonwealth Edison had done for 48 years and what they had failed to do for 48 years in one of the most fundamental aspects of safe Edison practice and electrical practice. What you're going to be hearing about and what you're going to read about in this case, and what happened to Robert Zulauf and Jordan Zulauf, revolves around a thing called an insulator, a Johnny ball. It's on a guy wire, and it's one of the most fundamental aspects in this industry. It's been known for 100 years that a Johnny ball has to be placed in a certain position such that if this guy wire comes loose, it can protect people, not just workers for ComEd, not just subcontractors, but the public and the safety. And what you're going to find out as we go through this and what Commonwealth Edison did is that it was a pervasive and it was a knowledgeable indifference to the safety of people like Jordan and like Jeanette. And for 48 years, they left it that way after hundreds of inspections of this pole and this guy wire. In fact, they allowed out of the 1.4 million poles that they have in their district, in Commonwealth District, they have only 30 inspectors. And those inspectors are allowed to inspect these poles while they're in their car and they're moving. And these are some of the things that we've learned about the activities that led to the fact that on November 8th, 2016, this guy wire came loose and Robert was killed and Jordan was irreparably harmed for the rest of his life. So when we talk about what goes on between the Interstate Commerce Commission and Commonwealth Edison, we're talking about something that has been happened to humans. And Jeanette and Jordan are going to tell you a little bit of how this has affected them and how the news on Friday affected them.
And another thing we're going to be looking at is why was it that Commonwealth Edison felt so comfortable not enforcing safety rules when the ICC is the entity that's supposed to be overlooking them for the public health. And the federal filing on Friday may shed some light on the fact of why ComEd thinks that it can get away with not following safety rules and regulations because it may have some special relationship with the governing bodies with whom it's not supposed to have that type of relationship.
Jen, if we can, what we'd like to do are to go to the images.
Yes, that sounds good. Let's start there. Why don't you walk everyone through what they're seeing?
So let me do this. So what I'm showing you is a model. We can start with that image. What you see is a photograph of the electrocution that took place. This was filmed by a bystander across the street at the time. You see the fire that was taking place, that had consumed Robert Zulauf as a result of the safety violation that Commonwealth Edison had left in place for 48 years. Commonwealth Edison recently admitted right before the COVID shutdown, after denying it for the first 3 years of this litigation, they admitted that this was a safety violation that existed for 48 years. And what we're trying to determine in this case, and we're requesting a full audit from the ICC, as to how many of these safety violations they have and when they're going to clean them up. It's been revealed in the litigation in this case that Commonwealth Edison has thousands of these, and there is no timetable for the repair of these safety violations. We can go to the next slide. Well, Chris, yeah, okay, that was the first one. Can we go to the next one?
Stephan, why don't you walk through the example you have next to you?
Sure.
While we resolve the photo issues.
While Chris is looking for that, this is a replica of the scene of the occurrence at the time. And what you see power lines, 34 kilovolt power lines, 12,000 kilovolt power lines that take place at this scene. It's surrounded by gas stations, nursing homes, grocery stores, and apartment complexes. This is a very high traffic area, and it's across the street from a Commonwealth Edison substation. These devices, these 4 cables that I'm touching, are called guy wires. They support these poles, these Commonwealth Edison poles, and have been in place for 48 years. As Bob Bingle mentioned, for the last 100 years, there's been a requirement that you have a safety device called an insulator placed on these guy wires, so that if the guy wire comes loose for any reason and contacts the power line, that the lower portion of the guy wire is insulated and protected. And the problem here is that the insulator that was supposed to be placed on our device was placed too high, so that it was ineffective. It needed to be placed below the energized lines so that it would protect the Comcast crews and other individuals from telecommunication companies like Robert and Jordan that were at the scene. So while they were stringing Comcast cable and this guy wire came loose, it made contact with an energized power line, and Robert died a horrific death, and Jordan suffered catastrophic injuries. And what you see in this photograph is an image that was taken. You can see the arcing that's taking place at the top of the pole. The blue is electricity that is running down the guy wire. And there needed to be a Johnny ball, a glass insulator in place to prevent that from traveling down. And somehow there has been a systemic problem at Commonwealth Edison. For 48 years, they missed this violation. And it's been taking place not only at this location, but at others. And the relationship between Commonwealth Edison bribery of state government and the Illinois Commerce Commission needs to be thoroughly looked at, because this is not just a matter of rates being adjusted in Commonwealth Edison's favor. This is a matter of Commonwealth Edison being protected by the Illinois Commerce Commission. The relationship has been way too cozy over the year, and we are calling on state officials to fully investigate this relationship because of the human cost to Robert and Jeanette and their families. So what I'd like to do is to have you hear from Jeanette a little bit. Jeanette's anniversary, her wedding anniversary with Robert, was over the weekend. And I know when she got the news on Friday about this bribery scheme between Commonwealth Edison and the regulators, that it affected her career. Jeanette, if you can talk a little bit about your reaction.
Hi, I'm Jeanette. I obviously, when I heard, my reaction was suffocated. I feel just suffocated from all of this in general. It's a constant reminder every day of how Jordan is now living, how we are living without the man who was supposed to be here. And it's just shocking. I worry most about other families. I don't want anybody else to go through what we're going through right now. You know, Jordan has forever been stalled in his life. I have a child who will not know his father, and two that will grow without them. And me, I no longer have my husband.
Thank you, Jeanette. Jordan, what was your reaction?
I was just more or less just withdrawal, but they were just so okay with, yeah, sure, here's 200 mil, just leave us alone. Just, I don't know, I was angry, I guess. I don't, like Jeanette said, like suffocated, so many different emotions just overwhelm you at once.
Thank you, Jordan. Jennifer, we're going to open it up to questions from the media.
Thanks, everybody. There should be a little hand icon for you to click on and indicate that you've got a question, and we'll certainly turn the microphone over to you. Right now, the queue is empty, so we're certainly ready to go in that regard. In the meantime, Stephan, can you provide a status on the civil case?
Sure. So the civil case was scheduled to proceed to trial in June. It should have been over by now, but the COVID pandemic shut down the courthouse and stalled and delayed this case. The case is currently pending in the Circuit Court of Cook County. We are seeking leave to request violation of the Public Utility Act for punitive damages against Commonwealth Edison as a result of their willful violations of the Act. We are at the expert discovery stage of the litigation. We have been told that the case will proceed early next year to trial.
Stephan, can you talk about what you're seeking? What would be an ideal service of justice in this case?
Well, right now what we're seeking, and the reason we're having this press conference, is there seems to be a rush to judgment right now in terms of this 3-year plea agreement with Commonwealth Edison. And the entire focus of the press release and of the indictment and the documents that we've been given are solely on the rate hikes. And before this settlement is approved, we need to make sure that the U.S. Attorney's Office and the federal judge that has to approve it, that they are fully aware that there's been a human dynamic to this case as well. In addition to that, there is an unresolved issue in the state of Illinois. Commonwealth Edison has 1.4 million polls, and they have not yet come clean to advise the state officials, the Illinois Commerce Commission regulators, as to how many of these are in violation of safety statute. And we are calling upon them to do so. We are calling upon the Commerce Commission, which is charged with the responsibility of regulating the safety of Commonwealth Edison, to make sure that they force Commonwealth Edison to disclose the number of safety violations and to quickly repair them. We know that back in 2009, the Commonwealth did exactly that with downstate competitor Ameren. Ameren also polls in Illinois. The Commerce Commission asked Ameren, how many violations do you have? Ameren truthfully responded that they had 45,000 violations, and they worked with the commission to correctly remediate and repair them within a 2-year period. At that same time, that same effort was not made with Commonwealth Edison. What we have Commonwealth Edison starting a program in 2009 to begin to look for it. But there's been no enforcement, there has been no compliance, and to date, Commonwealth Edison refuses to do a system-wide audit, even though Jordan lost his arms and Robert died.
I might add that this is Bob Bingle from Morrissey, that just as kind of synopsize what Stephan just said. What we're looking for is accountability. And that's what Jordan's looking for, and that's what Jeanette's looking for. We're looking for how and why could the ICC allow this monolithic entity that's given a monopoly, basically, in Northern Illinois to go 48 years and allow this unbelievably dangerous situation to exist. So we are really looking for and going to dig as deep as we can and to find out how this could occur and how this could be allowed to happen over that time span.
Everyone, we have a question from Steve Daniels at Crane's Chicago Business. Steve, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. And I did want to just express my condolences to both of the plaintiffs for the terrible things that you've gone through. Jordan, I wanted to ask you, you know, are you able to work at all? I mean, what are you able to do given your disability now, or not do?
Well, I'm not really sure what I'm capable of doing. Like, I don't know what a normal job for a guy without arms really is. Like, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know, like, I had a buddy that, like, mows lawns, and then, like, what would I really do with him? Like, I have friends, like, that have all their businesses, but, like, what would I really do? And then it's just kind of there. Like, what am I going to do?
Thank you, Jordan.
I'd like to ask I'd like to ask David and Bob to walk through the number of polls you believe are involved in this situation compared to the number of inspectors that you believe are available, and what that ratio is. How many polls does each inspector have to actually be responsible for? That number may be interesting to people.
Well, at last count, ComEd identified 1.4 million polls up here and identified them as having only 30 inspectors. And a quick run of the math on that puts it at 45,000 polls per inspector. Reading the story that they're checking these polls every 2 years or every 4, there are not enough hours in the day to check those polls. So there is no way that they're doing what they claim to be doing. They are not checking these polls. Likely haven't checked hundreds of thousands of these polls. Any check they do, if driving by in a moving car while in traffic, looking to see if an insulator is in the proper location so that 12 or 34,000 volts doesn't get sent down to the ground where people work, like Jordan and Robert, in the communication space, or where children play on the ground. It's shocking. And one wonders why it is at Commonwealth Edison, knowing this rule, knowing the law, feels comfortable in having only 30 people doing a job that they know they can't do. And then why is it that they don't think they're going to get in trouble? And the filing on Friday begs the question. If a company, it's like being a little bit pregnant. Is Commonwealth Edison only a little bit corrupt? Or does it have its fingers, its claws, in other places it doesn't belong? It doesn't belong in the legislature, where the legislature is supposed to be enacting rate hikes or rate regulations on behalf of the people. And it's not supposed to be involved with the ICC, which is supposed to be monitoring ComEd and making sure that it's following the rules. So when we see a utility like Ameren in Southern Illinois with thousands of violations and being called to task by ICC, and then we see a utility up here with thousands of violations and not being called to task by the ICC, one has to wonder why. And the Friday filing seems to be an answer.
I might add that Ameren, in the 2 years after they were given notice of this by the ICC, made 35,000 corrections to guy wire insulator problems.
I would also add that Ameren has since more than doubled the number of its inspectors.
ComEd still does nothing.
Thank you, everyone. We do have a question from Stacy St. Clair at the Chicago Tribune. Stacy, you might be muted. We're not able to hear your.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, much better, yes.
Okay. Stephan, you mentioned that you had reached out to federal prosecutors. Can you talk a little bit about what was said and if you've provided anything to them?
Well, we have not heard back from the U.S. Attorney's Office. We are very, very keenly interested to make sure that they are aware of this relationship. We reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office well before the announcement on Friday. And then again today, when their offices opened up, we reached out again to make sure they knew. At their press conference on Friday, they had called for any groups with information about the relationship between Commonwealth Edison and the government to come forward, and we're doing that. We want to make sure that all of this information regarding the human effect of what Edison has done is taken into account.
Great, thanks.
If I could add on what Stephan just said and what Jeanette said, that we don't want to see this happen to someone else. What we've found to be one of the more remarkable facts of this case is that, on the one hand, ComEd can pretend they didn't know this could happen, but of course they did, because they're supposed to be checking for it. Now, we find the evidence thus far is that it's happened, and still, they do not have a thorough check of their system to be able to know how many more are out there, where they are, and how and when they're going to fix them. And stop them. And the question is, what does it take to get ComEd to do the law requires it to do?
Let me just go back and answer one of the earlier questions that was raised about why Commonwealth Edison is not doing a thorough inspection. If they document, like Ameren did, how many violations they have, they'll have to pay for this. They'll have to pay for their violations. They'll have to pay to repair the work. They don't want to pay for it.
I just want to note that we're close to the end of the press conference, and if any of the reporters on the line do have something else you'd like to ask, just click that hand icon. And while we give everybody a minute to do that, Stephan, could you also walk through that these poles are not just electrical? Talk about the dynamic of what else is hanging on them. You've talked about that in the past. It could be helpful now.
Absolutely. So keep in mind what was taking place at the time. Robert and Jordan were in the process of lashing Comcast fiber optic cable. So Commonwealth Edison rents out its 1.4 million poles to Comcast and other telecommunication companies. And over the years, citizens of Chicago and the state of Illinois will notice that there are lots and lots of cable lines that are being added to these poles. And don't think for a minute that ComEd doesn't charge for that. ComEd knows full well that these telecommunications workers like Robert and Jordan are going out and working on this equipment and working on equipment that is dangerous and hazardous, that they are not inspecting and they are not repairing. So anybody who's walked around the city of Chicago will see that there are telecommunication lines just hanging from Commonwealth Edison power poles. And the question is, who inspected that? Who approved that? And as a result of our litigation, we have determined that Commonwealth Edison doesn't inspect, doesn't approve of overlashing. They let Comcast and the other telecom companies place this cable on their equipment. They charge rent for it, but they don't inspect it and they don't approve it to make sure that their equipment is safe. And as a result of that, you have the human tragedy, the human loss that Jeanette and Jordan will experience for the rest of their lives.
Thank you, Stephan. I do want to give Jeanette and Jordan one last opportunity if there's anything else that they would like to say about the last few years of your lives or about the last few days.
The last few years, along with the last few days, are forever changed. Robert's not here. Robert was a man who was extremely safety precautious. Jordan was under his wing. He was learning so much in life. We just lost so much. We didn't just lose a man who was working on a pole to give communication. You know, we lost someone who we forever have to live without. Jordan will forever have to live figuring out whether he'll work again, figuring out whether he'll have children, whether he'll do this, you know, and I say that just because he doesn't know what he is capable of doing anymore. And besides the fact I'm raising 3 children that will never meet their father or see their father, memories won't come anymore. And all that hurts, and I could not even fathom another family feeling like this. So we just want justice.
I wouldn't wish this on anybody. Like, I wouldn't. Nobody. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, people say I make it look easy, but it is difficult. It's hard. It takes a lot of energy to do a lot of the things I do all day. I love my job. I didn't want to do anything else. Worked with my uncle. Just love my job.
Thank you, guys.
Jordan and Jeanette.
Thank you both. Stephan, David, Bob, any closing comments?
No, not for me. I just wanted to make sure that we don't move on. You know, Commonwealth Edison, their PR team is already out there trying to spin the story that it was just a few bad apples and it only took place for a little while. Well, we've uncovered 48 years of safety violations in the relationship with the Illinois Commerce Commission. This is not just a couple of bad apples. This is a systemic problem, and everyone needs to know about it.
And I would just add that nothing we can do but bring back the wonderful father and husband and man that Robert was. We can't bring back Jordan's arms, but we can give them some form of justice. And that's what we're going to do.
Thank you, everyone. I will just add to the reporters, if there's anything else you need from me this afternoon or going forward, certainly you've got my email, jmcguffin@rblaw.net, and happy to advocate for the Zulaufs in any way that you might need. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank
Bye
you.
now.